Last week, about 24 of us were in Greece for a tour of Paul's missionary journey after he got the Macedonian call, which is in Acts chapter 16. But we also visited other sites all throughout ancient Greece that help us understand the roots of Western civilization. And we all learned a lot and had a really great time. And of course, I have been there several times before, but each time I go, I learn something new. I learn something more, and I come back with a richer, deeper understanding of our faith and also of history. But then on Wednesday, which is September 10th, it was about 11 p.m. in Greece. I was packing up for our last day, which was going to be Thursday, and then we fly out Friday. And that Wednesday evening, as about 11:15, my phone began to go off, and people asking the question, did you see, did you hear, Charlie Kirk had been shot? And of course, as many of you may have done, I went on social media to see if that's really true. And of course, I saw the horrific video, and I thought it was just an AI-generated video. You know, you see a lot of those and you don't know whether it's true or not. And quickly realized, unfortunately, it was not AI generated. It was very, very real. And it was murder on camera. Now, that night, I tossed and turned and slept very little. I'm sure many of you were probably in the same situation. The next day, as we were back from our last day of trip, we were back in Athens, I kind of thought to myself how ironic it is that I am in the cradle of Western civilization. The cradle, that's where the baby is kept after he or she is born. I'm in the cradle of Western civilization, and that act of violence represented an assault on the very foundation of our culture, on the very cradle of our culture. Especially America. And if you're here this morning and you're thinking, what is the big deal? Or why is everybody making a big deal out of this? Then I'm glad you're here, because you need to understand. If you're here this morning and you do understand, I hope it will not just remain as a memory, that it will lead to some action. That his death, which is really his murder, should not be left as something from a distant past, but it should spur us to action. So this morning's message is a little different than I typically preach, but it's a message that I think we need to hear. And I don't want to get up here and just shout and scream and all those kind of things. I want to use this brief time we have to educate, to challenge, and to encourage you to leave a legacy that will outlast you, because that is the title of our message, because that's what comes to my mind when I think about Charlie Kirk. He left a legacy that will outlast him. You have your Bibles with you. Turn to the book of Acts, chapter 17 and verse 16. Acts chapter 17 and verse 16. In your pew Bibles, it will be page 1710, 1710. Acts 17 and verse 16, page 1710 in your pew Bibles. It says, now while Paul waited for them at Athens, we were in Athens when I got this news. Now, while Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols. Therefore, he reasoned. The Greek word is dialegomai, reason. It is used 13 times in the New Testament, 10 times just in the book of Acts by Paul. Dialegomai, reason, this is the word that gives us the English word dialogue. Charlie Kirk dialogued. He wanted people to talk. Come, pick up the microphone and say what's on your mind, and let's talk. Because when people stop talking, as he would say, we begin to hate each other. Come together and talk. We're going to see in a few moments that that is one of the fundamental value of Western civilization, especially America. America is different. Europe is wonderful in its own way, but I would never want to be a European. America is a very, very, very different country. Nothing like this has ever existed in the history of this planet. Reasoning, debating, talking is a fundamental value of our culture. Paul reasoned in Greece, which is also very significant, and we're going to see that in a few moments. And then it goes on to say, he reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshipers, and he also reasoned in the marketplace, in the agora, daily with those who happened to be there. Just the way Charlie Kirk went from campus to campus, dialoguing, bringing people up and saying, prove me wrong, change my mind. That's what Paul did in the synagogue and in the marketplace. And then it says, verse 18, then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, what does this babbler want to say? And others said, he seemed to be a proclaimer of foreign gods, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection, Jesu and Anastasis. And they thought that was a god and goddess of some babbling religion. You know, Greeks looked upon other cultures as barbarians. So that's what they were saying to Paul. When they said babbler, they were saying this barbarian. What is he going to teach us? Keep in mind that Greece was under Roman rule at this time. And they did not like the Romans. We often say the Greco-Roman. They did not like the Romans. They considered Romans to be barbarians. They were very proud of their heritage, their philosophies, their ability to debate and discuss with each other. So Rome, they did not like one bit. And now comes this Jewish man who is also one of these babblers. What are you going to say to us? What are you going to teach us? We have stuck our noses in every subject there is, and our philosophers have reasoned and they understand things that you will never understand. What do you got to teach us? This Jesu and Anastasis, okay. But then it says in verse 19, and they took him and brought him to the Areopagus. They did not beat him. The Greeks did not beat him. They did not stab him. They brought him. They said, okay, all right, you're making a case for something we don't understand. We haven't heard this before. Would you come with us? Where are we going? You're going on the Areopagus. If you've been to Greece, some of you have, right there is the Acropolis. And if you look from the Acropolis down, you will see a very jagged hill. That is the Areopagus. Areopagus is Ares' Pagos. Ares is hill, also known as Mars Hill. The Greeks called their god Ares, the god of war. Romans called him Mars, but the same thing. This was where their supreme council met, and they said, Paul, come up here and talk to us. May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak. For you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean. For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. You know, after a major tragedy or a catastrophe, people are usually searching for some meaning. They're looking for some purpose. They want to know where to stand and how to move forward. In our age of social media, people usually turn to their social media platforms. And after the murder, it's not just he died, it's a murder, it's a crime. I told our guide, I said, no, he died. He said, no, he was murdered. I said, you're right. We need to change that. He was murdered. It's not just the death of Charlie Kirk, it's the murder of Charlie Kirk. You see, after his murder, many took a stand on social media. Some took a biblical stand, for which I'm more grateful. I like the biblical stands better. Others vented, which I understand. We have a need to vent, but yet others posted just to get some attention, which I don't understand. Somebody got killed and you want likes. I think you need to get before God and really examine your heart. That's all I would say. Unfortunately, there are others who remain silent, from ordinary people to Christian leaders. People, some of them I admire. I am shocked and disappointed. And I understand that some of you don't post much anyways, and that's perfectly fine. I would not have social media if it wasn't for the church. I would delete all my accounts. It's only for church purposes, to inform people, to educate people, to answer questions that I have, all these social media platforms. And if you see me a lot, it's not me, it's our staff who are posting for me. Some people say, you're always on, like, not really. But here's the point. If you typically speak out and you're not, your silence is deafening. What I have seen is that much of what is being said, good or bad, is coming from a place of ignorance. Ignorance is not bliss. It can be fatal. In today's message, I want to educate, challenge, and even encourage you to leave a legacy that matters. And our time is very short. But before we can undertake, we need to understand. Before we can take action, we need to apprehend. It is very easy for me to tell you 3 things we need to do. We need to pray. We need to talk to our young people. We can do that. Those are 3 very simple things to do. But we need to understand, because if not, it will fizzle away. And I don't want this to fizzle out. I'm praying that God will raise a generation just like Sawyer and others who will understand what Charlie Kirk's message was really about, and I'm praying that each of us will not allow his death to be in vain. To begin with, we must step back to see forward. We need to see where we came from. You see, where do we come from helps us to understand where we are and where we are headed. You say, oh, maybe. I want you to see the history of this nation not as a river, but as a house. You know, a river can start anywhere, it doesn't really matter, as long as it comes and brings you water. But a house is different. The foundation of the house matters. The beginning of a river is coming from some mountain somewhere. Somewhere the snow is melting and it's meandering through the valleys, and here it comes to you and you purify the water and drink it. It doesn't matter. America was not built as a river. It was built as a house to home people. So we need to understand the foundation. And often the mistake people make is that they think that the foundation of our nation was from Greek democracy. And that is true and false. Thomas Cahill, who was a famous author, died a couple of years ago. He wrote several very important books. You may have seen them in bookstores or book sales. How the Irish Saved Civilization. Anybody here seen that? Yeah, some hands are going up. How the Irish Saved Civilization. The Gift of the Jews. He wrote these books. And then he wrote a book called Sailing the Wine Dark Sea. Why the Greeks Matter. And I want to clarify to you that I don't agree with Thomas Cahill on everything, so don't go buy the book and say, good grief, Pastor Shah really believes all this guy wrote? Not really. But then there is something that he said that really helps us, because in his books, he makes a point which is very true and helps us to clarify our understanding. And here's what he said. He said, though American democracy is often compared to its supposed Athenian model, the American experiment, as well as other modern examples of democracy, derives not directly from Greece. You say, well, wait a minute. Just a few moments ago, you said Greece was the cradle of Western civilization and Athens was the cradle. What are you saying over here? No, I'm clarifying now. We're going deeper in our understanding. It derives not directly from Greece, but from the European Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th century of our era. The rediscovery of Athenian political ideals by the humanists of the Renaissance certainly acted as a catalyst to Enlightenment thought. So when we think about this, we often think this is what the America's foundation looks like: Greek democracy. And what Thomas Cahill is saying is this is not true. Greek democracy is a small part of it, but it's not the only part. It's European philosophers who rediscovered Greek thought and incorporated it in their understanding of what makes a successful nation. Everybody still with me? We think this is it. No, this is a part of it. European philosophers, Montesquieu, John Locke, and others, they were philosophers, they were jurists, they were lawyers, and they argued and they discussed and they studied ancient philosophies and Greek writers, and they began to understand what makes a good, successful society. Thomas Cahill goes on to say, as one surveys the actual terrain of Athenian democracy, one is more likely to be struck by the vast historical and cultural divide that separates the burgeoning Athenian democracy from the seething North American colonies of Massachusetts, Virginia, and New York. It means there was a world of difference between Athens and the early American colonies. So yes, understanding Athens and Greek and the Lycian League helps us understand where America is today, but that's not where we turn to for our primary source. European philosophers used ancient writers, but there was more. By the way, let me back up here for a moment, and let's talk about Athenian democracy. What did it look like? And see if we can see that in America today. And I'm going deeper here. Pericles was an Athenian general. He was a statesman. He was a brilliant man. He was also a fighter. He fought in the Persian Wars. You know, when Persia came against Athens. He fought in the Peloponnesian Wars when Sparta, you know, everybody loves Sparta. Sparta was good at one time, and then they wanted to control everybody. So Athens had to first fight off the Persians, and then later their own people, the Spartans, who wanted to control them. At the end of the first year of the Peloponnesian War, which is Athens versus Sparta, lots and lots of young people died in the army. And they asked Pericles to speak at their funeral. And listen to what he says and see if it reminds you of what America is, what our founding fathers envisioned. Pericles says, "For our system of government does not copy the systems of our neighbors. We are a model to them, not they to us. Our Constitution is called a democracy because power rests in the hands not of a few, but of the many." This is Pericles speaking at the 1-year death anniversary of the Peloponnesian War. Our laws guarantee equal justice for all in their private disputes. And as for the election of public officials, we welcome talent in every arena of achievement. Means you should be given admission based on your talent, not just based on which group you come from. That's what Pericles is saying. Nor do we make our choices on the grounds of class, but on the grounds of excellence alone. And as we give free play to all in our public life, so we carry the same spirit in our daily relations with one another. We have no evil looks or angry words for our neighbor if he enjoys himself in his own way, and we even abstain from little acts of rudeness. Would you agree that America, a culture, has become more rude and disrespectful? I mean, I've been in this nation now for over 30 years, and I've seen a big change in how people act and treat one another. It's very tragic and sad and heartbreaking. But what Pericles is saying is that in Athens, we don't do that. You know, I'm jumping ahead here. Our founding fathers, they were not just old men in powdered wigs who were trying to, control the world. They were trying to create a society by taking the best of the Greek ideals from the best of the European philosophers, and everything was based on the Bible. 1/3 of all the quotations in our Constitution come from the Bible. When people say the Constitution, that's an outdated document. I have names for you, but I'm in church on the pulpit. I can't do that. Plus, I'm a pastor. That's not a nice thing to do. I would just say you're ignorant. Come on. What those men, and were they perfect? Absolutely not. What they tried to achieve was something unbelievable. They found a place for you, and for me in this nation. That's what they were trying to do. And they took the best that Pericles was saying, and the best minds at the time, 17th, 18th century, were thinking, and they used the Bible as the matrix to create something that will outlast them and be a force for good in this world. That is the United States of America. Nothing like America has ever existed. You say, well, Athens, look at what... Let me read you some more of Pericles' speech because I'm going somewhere with this. He says, open and tolerant in our private lives, in our public affairs, we keep within the law. We acknowledge the restraint of reverence. We are obedient to those in authority and to the laws. He goes on to say, wealth to us is not mere material for vainglory, but an opportunity for achievement. It means we want to earn money not just so we can be rich, we want to do something. And we think poverty nothing to be ashamed of unless one makes no effort to overcome it. That's why in a restaurant, we even tell the girl who comes up to wait on us, yes, ma'am. Or to that young man, he may be living with someone, doesn't have a home, doesn't have any other prospect. We say, yes, sir. Can I have some water? Thank you, sir. Why do we do that in America? We don't do that anywhere else in the world. We don't do that in Europe, in England. If you did that, people look at you funny. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. You say, yes, sir. They go, why are you calling me sir? But only in America we believe just because you do that job does not mean that you're less than me. That's a very American ideal. Pericles goes on to say here, this is very important. He says, we differ from other states, talking about Sparta and others, in regarding the man who keeps aloof from public life, not as private, but as useless. If you say politics is dirty, in Athens we don't do that. We want people to be involved in politics. We want them to take part. We don't want them to be obsessed with it, but we want them to be involved. Isn't that what we want in America? We decide or debate. Pericles, 5th century BC. This is before Alexander the Great. He said, we decide or debate carefully and in person all matters of policy, and behold, not that words and deeds go ill together, but that acts are foredoomed to failure when undertaken undiscussed. So we need to discuss, we need to dialogue. How amazing it is that when Paul went to Greece and went to Athens, he did not just preach at them, he reasoned with them because he knew the culture he was in. Our founding fathers gave us a nation which was built on reasoning, debating, dialoguing. He says, other men are bold in ignorance, while reflection will stop their going forward. But the bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what lies before them, glory and danger alike. I want you to hear that again. Pericles said this 2,500 years ago, but it perfectly applies to Charlie Kirk. He says, The bravest are surely those who have the clearest vision of what lies before them, glory and danger alike, and yet go forth to meet it. Our founding fathers envisioned a country where we will have a clearest vision. The problem today is people don't have a vision, but they have a mouth. They are what do you call them? Keyboard warriors, right? They just want to spout to get a few likes. What a big difference. What a huge difference. So listen to what Pericles goes on to say. He says, in doing good, we are the exact opposite of the rest of mankind. We secure our friends not by accepting favors, but by granting them. And so this makes friendship with us something that can be counted on. For we are eager as creditors to cement by continued kindness our relation to our friends. Means we want to make friends and we want to do things for you. You know, America often gets judged for this, that, and the other, but anywhere there's a catastrophe or a war, guess what they say? Where is America? And then when America comes and helps, they go, well, we want you to leave now. It's quite interesting. But you see, our founding fathers understood this because what Pericles is saying is, when we are friends with someone, we give. We're not the receivers, we are givers. That makes us who we are. So when you say, oh, we need to stop caring about the world, you know, that's what makes America America. Because that's when the world goes, we don't get it. Why are you people helping us? Because we hate you. By the way, let me also clarify one thing. The common people across the world, whether it's in the Middle East, Africa, Asia, the common people in Europe, in Latin America, they love America. They will do anything to be here. It's the rulers, it's the despots who hate America. Everywhere we go, Nicole will tell you, they don't want a picture with me because I look like them. They want pictures with her. And she asked me, she said, what do I do? I said, just go along with it. They just want to say that I know an American. I said, they don't want with you. I was like, why do you think? Now, I skipped over much of that speech. You know, this speech was an inspiration to Lincoln for his Gettysburg Address. He read Pericles. Did you know that Churchill read Pericles every time he was talking to the world and to England during World War II? Did you know that John F. Kennedy quoted Pericles in his first inaugural address? This is education. But let me kind of stop for a moment. I know some of y'all thinking, man, to be able to live in Athens. I love America, but Athens, now that's where I wanted to be. Did you also know that 40% of Athens' population were slaves? Did you know that the other 40% were freedmen, but they had no voting rights? So guess who Pericles is talking to? Only 20% of the Athenians. And guess what? If you were a woman in Athens, you were second class. How many of y'all want to move to Athens in Pericles' time? I can go and tell you, not me. When someone says America this and America that, and oh, I want to move here, move there, I want to say, go. Go. You'll try to come back. You see, ignorance is not just bliss, it's fatal, because when we have these wrong ideas which are propagated by our colleges, our universities, that's where it begins. And Charlie Kirk was very vocal on this. He said college and university, teach the subject, teach it completely. Even if you're teaching history, teach the whole spectrum of history. Don't give a negative view just because you have a negative view of America. I hope all of this is beginning to make sense. As inspiring as the Greeks were, America was not founded on just the Greek understanding of freedom, although it mattered. It was all three of these things, with this one being the major, the Bible. All men are, Athenians would laugh at you if you said all men are created equals. Spartans, oh, go Spartans. Spartans, they purposely kept the hoplites under slavery. All they did all day long was fight and wrestle and buff up, and they get everybody down. You don't want to be a Spartan. You don't want to be an Athenian. Where do you think that all men are created equal? Not from just European philosophers, not just from, definitely not from them. They got it from the Bible. You know what Charlie Kirk was saying? That the Bible is the foundation of our nation. And people are like, oh, you're just a fundamentalist. That is the fact. That is the fact. Unalienable rights? The only people who had true rights in Athens were the Athenians. Everybody else was second class. You see, we don't understand the truth. Our founding fathers tried to bring together all the best ideals that ever existed in ancient past, all the best thinking of the best minds of their time, and the Bible as the key foundational block to give us a very unique nation called the United States of America. Nothing like this has ever existed anywhere on the planet since the dawn of time, and it's worth protecting. You know, you saw the video in the opening. Charlie Kirk based his philosophy on 3 ideas. The first was America is the greatest country in the history of the world. People say, oh, what do you mean great? There was slavery and there was this and this and that. Great does not mean that it doesn't have faults. Great means that you are aspiring for ideals that are worth dying for. Hence, there was a civil war in our nation. The second idea he had was the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written. And guess what? It is. And free enterprise is the most assured way to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity for all. It doesn't mean always the ground is equal, but I promise you this much, it is far better than anywhere else in the world. I can take you to a nation where people cross the other side of the street just so that your shadow won't fall on them. Why? Because you come from a lower caste. Let's go back to Acts 17. Before we do that, as you find Acts 17, you know, the killer was using anti-fascist rhetoric that, these are fascists that we need to fight against. The Antifa, right? Anti-fascists. Some call themselves fighting the Nazis. They're fighting the Nazis. He was like a Nazi. Did you know that both fascism and Nazism came out of a debate within socialism? Nazi stands for National Socialist Party in Germany at the time. It's Marxism that fell apart into 2 groups. One side is Bolshevism, Leninism. Other side was fascism and Nazism. That's why, listen very carefully, don't let your enemies define you. Somebody called me a white nationalist, and I was like, you need to get your eyes checked. Well, because you're saying the same thing. Like, I don't have to say the same thing. I have people who leave this church because they don't like what I say. So if I wanted to please everybody, I would just always tell you, you're wonderful, you're all good, love me, take care of me. No, I don't do that. I say things because it's the Word of God. I say things because it's coming from this book. My old professor said it one time. He said, don't let your enemies define you. What they have done in America is they have relabeled people and called them Nazis, and then they're fighting them. Don't believe that rhetoric. Hey, here's the point. You cannot put a terrorist scarf around your neck and then say, we hate Israel, and we're going to fight the Nazis. Some of y'all got it, some of y'all didn't. And young people eat this up, just like that young man who was groomed online. His family came from a Mormon family, but apparently a conservative family. I want you to understand something, parents. I'm going to put this up here. We used to think that all it matters is home, church, school. Give them a good home, find them a good church, and send them to a good school, and we're all okay. I think the stool has four legs. It's not just home, church, school. It's also social media. He was groomed. And these two things are deadly. Very deadly. Means you can do whatever you can to raise your children with godly values and send them to a school where godly values are given. And yet if they go off to a college, they're going to meet a professor who is very winsome, and before you know it, they follow him. But here's my encouragement to you. Train up a child in the way they should go. Means at this point, if you're not sure on some issue, don't say whatever comes to your heart. Stick to the Bible. And maybe one day they will come back to it by God's grace. I would say they will come back to it. Not maybe, they will come back to it. Now, I want us to go back here. Our time is very short. How did Paul preach to them? They brought him on the Areopagus in Acts chapter 17 and starting in verse 22. Let's turn to the screen at this point. So we're standing on top of Areopagus or Mars Hill. In Acts chapter 17, Paul came here. In fact, he began probably on the Acropolis by the Parthenon, was probably in the Agora talking to the Stoic, Epicurean philosophers. And then when they realized that something more was going on here, and they brought him up here to hear more about Jesus and Anastasis. They thought Anastasis was a goddess, but Anastasis simply is resurrection. So listen to Paul's speech in Acts chapter 17, verse 22. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. Therefore the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all by raising him from the dead. So what happens after Paul gives this amazing sermon right here on Mars Hill Areopagus? It goes on to say in Acts 17, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, we will hear you again on this matter. So Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed, among whom was Dionysius the Areopagite, means one of the rulers of this supreme council, a woman named Damaris, and others with them. It goes to tell us that sometimes when we put ourselves in difficult situations for the gospel, at first it may seem like nothing is working, or it seems like you are the odd one. But in time you find out that God is moving, and somebody from right in this powerful council in Athens got saved, and a woman who was probably a prominent woman got saved, and many others followed. God's gospel of Christ keeps going forward. So standing here, is amazing to think that what took place 2,000 years ago is still impacting the church today, and is the way we need to win our culture. When I said those words and we filmed, that was 4 days before Charlie Kirk's murder. I never imagined that that video would be played this very Sunday. But the message is so true. As he's brought up on Areopagus and as he reasons with them, not everybody listened. Some mocked him, but then some actually received Jesus Christ. One was from their own council, the Athenian Supreme Court, Dionysius. Another one was a woman, a prominent woman, and others got saved. So Charlie Kirk and what he believed and the gospel that he preached is not going to go in vain. Already we're seeing so many people on different sides of the aisles coming forward and saying, something this man had that I don't understand, but I want it. What America needs is an awakening. What America needs is a revival. Don't let our enemies define us and who we are. The world on which Western civilization is built is one in which the outward form is Greco-Roman, but its inward content is Judeo-Christian. We have the old Greek values that Pericles was talking about, and we also have the system of laws and order like the Romans did, but our heart is the Bible. What Greece had a fleeting glimpse of and Europe only understood, we as Americans got to experience for these several hundred years. More than anything, we have to give the gospel of Jesus Christ more than ever. We have to dialogue. We have to reason. You have people in your life that are lost. Don't assume that everything is okay. Somehow they will find God. No, you have to give it to them. Don't assume that if you're raising your children, I told my son, my daughter this and that. Someone will get to them. Someone is trying to get to them, no matter how much you try to protect them. You say, well, what's the hope we have? The hope we have is that you not only train them in the way of the Lord, but you serve alongside. Last weekend, Ryan preached a message on serving alongside as a family, because they need to see you live out the Christian life, not just preach at them. You have to give, you have to support a ministry like this, because you go, there's something special here. Some of us have a very, very small investment in what's happening. We have to be involved. We have to pray. This is our week of congregational prayer, and we're going to pray now. We're not just going to have a time of invitation. It's an invitation to come forward and join me in prayer. We're praying for our nation. We're praying for Erica Kirk. As you can imagine, how horrible it is to see your husband's life taken while your children are there with you. Imagine the pain, the trauma. Pray for our nation. Pray for our leaders.